Hello, my darling listeners. I have a quick announcement for you. If you're just now, as of June 22nd, 2023, finding our show, first of all, welcome and thank you for listening. And second of all, we want to let you know that we are now on Patreon. And if you would rather listen to this episode and all of the episodes to follow ad-free, then head on over to patreon.com/perfectlymarvelouspodcast, link in the description. And yeah, sign up for our Tits Up tier, where you can listen to all of our episodes ad-free for just $5 a month. Just $5, 5 little tiny doll hairs. And you'll get all of our episodes over there ad-free from now on. And our listener feedback episodes will also be video episodes. It's a whole bunch of fun. We would truly appreciate it. And we truly appreciate you, all of our listeners, regardless of where or how you choose to listen to us. But if you really love what we're doing and you'd like to patronize our perfectly marvelous efforts, we would so greatly appreciate it. This podcast is a labor of love, but every little bit helps as we continue to, give you guys more content, quality content. And throwing us a little coin, really helps us take more time to work on the show for you guys. And we have some exciting stuff in the works. We got interviews coming up, and we're going to be covering Only Murders in the Building. So you're going to have a lot of perfectly marvelous content. So yes, keep listening for those announcements. Join us on Patreon. Don't forget to come over to Facebook and join our Facebook pages for Maisel and Only Murders in the Building. And all the links, are in the show notes of this podcast. So thank you very much for listening, my loves, and enjoy the show. Tits up. Well, hey there, you. Yes, I mean you. Have you just finished watching an episode of your favorite television program, The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel? Are you looking for a podcast to enhance your viewing experience? Well, look no further. Welcome to Perfectly Marvelous. Join our hosts Erica, Kara, and Jade as they provide you with hours of witty banter, behind-the-scenes fun facts, and oh, so much more. Now sit back, relax, and get ready for a perfectly marvelous time. Good evening, folks. Welcome to the podcast. I'm Jade.
I'm Kara.
And I'm Erica.
And this is Perfectly Marvelous, a podcast dedicated to the magnificent, the magical, the marvelous Mrs. Maisel.
Today, we are very excited to be talking with Austin Basis, who plays Alvin Blank, the head writer for The Gordon Ford Show in season 5 of The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel.
Welcome, Austin. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me on your little marvelous podcast, your magical, marvelous podcast.
Oh, well, okay. Before we start, listeners, we have to tell you just a little bit about Austin and his incredible career thus far.
Yeah. So Austin was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. He graduated from the Actors Studio Drama School with an MFA in acting and is a lifetime member of the Actors Studio. And Austin is an actor, writer, producer, and has been diagnosed with type 1 diabetes himself at just 8 years old. He is an incredible advocate and celebrity ambassador for the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation.
In addition to playing Alvin on The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, Austin is most known for his role as J.T. Forbes on the award-winning series Beauty and the Beast. He was also a series regular on the CW drama Life Unexpected and was a lead in the Warner Brothers web series Ghost Facers, which I was super excited about because I watched the hell out of that and Supernatural. So, yeah. Big nerd moment for me there.
And for our listeners who might not know, Austin he's been directed by Clint Eastwood. He's shared the screen with the likes of Viola Davis, Larry David, Harvey Keitel, Sandra Oh, just the list goes on. And he's appeared in numerous TV shows, including, but not limited to, Curb Your Enthusiasm, How to Get Away with Murder, two of my favorites of all time. Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Little Fires Everywhere, Casual, so many more. And Austin's also appeared in numerous feature films and shorts, most recently First Oscar, where he plays the famed Hollywood producer David O. Selznick. You may have heard of him. And finally, Austin, he recently wrapped on the short films Kanashimi, The Last Take, and Daruma, which are all making the rounds in this year's festival circuit. And Austin also co-created and performed in an improv and sketch comedy show in New York City called Comedy. And with his production company, Behind the Bag Productions, he executive produced, wrote, and starred in the short film The Fear We Share. That's on Prime Video.
And in addition to his acting work, Austin has a podcast called Actor Speak, and he wrote and published a superhero comic book series in 2018 with his writing partners Dave Malbeck and Josh Taub called The Kinetics, about kids with disabilities and chronic illnesses who turn their perceived weaknesses into their greatest strengths. The story has been adapted into a full-length graphic novel and will be coming soon to a bookstore near you. Now, I'm going to interrupt. I'm a special ed teacher, and I think that's incredible, and I'm definitely going to look into it. I love that.
Awesome.
I love that.
And yeah, listeners, believe it or not, this is a mere smattering of Austin's credits and accomplishments, and all of the links to Austin's books and his podcast, his social media, and the ways that you can get involved in the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation. All of that is available in the show notes of this podcast. So check it out. And now, without further ado, let's start the show. What do you say, guys? Tits up?
Tits
up. Yay.
I have to say, man boobs up.
Boobs up.
Man
Whatever
boobs,
you
boobs
got.
up.
Boobs up.
Whatever you got, get them up, get them up.
Marvelous girl in my perfectly beautiful room, and we're living together and having a marvelous time.
Oh, Sally, I'm afraid it wouldn't work.
You don't think he could direct a drama, Alvin? Mel was on Caesar with me. I have no problem with Mel Brooks. I like Mel Brooks. Mel Brooks is funny. But here it comes. He likes air. Does he like air? He comes in a room like a Hoover and he sucks it all up. Ask Simon, ask Gilbert, hell, ask Sid.
A green-eyed monster doth mock the meat it feeds on.
He says Shakespeare before noon. My only request, dear Alvin, please stop taking your hatred for Mel Brooks out on me just because we share a name. I don't hate Mel Brooks.
Me neither. Hi. Am I in the right place?
Don't think so.
This is the writer's room, right?
Pretty much.
Writers in a room.
Well, I'm your new writer.
Alvin?
George mentioned some girl was starting with us. He didn't say when.
Well, I'm some girl, and today is the day. Who's George?
You'll know him when you see him. Mothballs. Boat shoes.
I have boat shoes.
I wouldn't have minded being consulted about a new hire, but I'm just the head writer, so what do I know? Millie?
Midge.
Midge? Never trust people whose names don't rhyme with anything.
Smidge. Bridge. Fridge.
Shit. That's Ralph, Mel, Adam, Cecil, and I'm Alvin. Sid.
Great. Got my sitting outfit on.
You're what?
Oh, yeah. I really could listen to clips from the Gordon Ford Writers Room all day long.
Oh my
So
gosh.
once again, welcome, Austin. We are so excited to have you here on the podcast with us and get to hear directly from you, Alvin himself.
Yes. Woohoo.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. It was such a great experience that I could talk about it for 3 hours, 6 hours, 2-parter, whatever you want.
Oh my gosh. All of it. We want it all.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we may or may not be known for having rather long podcasts at this point. So
Myself as well.
I'm glad you feel us there. So we put out some questions. We asked our listeners, give us your questions for Austin, and we got some really, really great ones back. I know we're probably not going to have time to get to all of them, but listeners, keep an ear out because I'm sure the answer to your question will probably come up as we discuss.
Yeah. Before we jump into the listener submissions, Austin, first we want to hear about you a little bit. So like, how did you get into acting? What was your, your origin story? Have you always wanted to be an actor? What was it like to start out?
Ironically, I'm sitting here at my nephew's baseball field to watch a finals of a baseball tournament. So actually, when I was younger, I had my sights set on Major League Baseball and playing for the New York Mets.
Nice.
And I guess late puberty, late bloomer, and maybe not the best Jewish genes, and a lot of other circumstances just led me kind of back to what I kind of grew up doing anyway. I went to Jewish summer camp and did a lot of musicals, and I always was a fan of Halloween, had my own like full round, year round costume chest.
Yes.
And
Awesome.
local costume store that I'd go to get, props and fake blood and, fake teeth, capes and masks and all that stuff all year round. So
Yes.
I kind of always have had it in my blood. Ironically, we did a web series about Dracula around
Oh my
the time,
gosh.
What We Do in
That's
the Shadows
awesome.
came out. It was
Nice.
called Dracula Goes to Camp. It was kind of Dracula Goes to Jewish sleepaway camp. And we were trying to pitch it as a series, but it is in my blood because I loved to play Dracula when I was younger. And, I wound up playing Dracula at some point, in middle school. But it's like slowly, I think, and it goes back to what you were saying early on of like, kind of having a lot of different things that I'm interested in and feel like I have, talent to contribute in. And I had that all throughout growing up, like a lot of extracurricular activities, dancing, art, writing, creative writing, combination of, sports and drama and, all this stuff. And then it's like, as you get older, all this stuff whittles away and you're like, which one am I going to choose to do for the rest of my life? And, you weigh all the ups and downs of like, how much money could I make in this field?
Oh, yeah.
What are my odds at success of actually making a living? And it really kind of naturally, everything fell away, and acting was the one that was always, there in the middle. And ironically, now that I've established or had a, career and some success, I've added other aspects and kind of getting back into, like I've told people, like, I felt like I was good at a lot of things, but I really wanted to try to be great at one thing. And that was acting. And so,
Well, you've
I feel like
succeeded there, my friend.
Yes. So
You're
sure.
okay. You're an okay actor.
I'm okay. I'm okay.
You're
I'm okay.
all right.
Yes, I'm right. Exactly. That's what we'd say in Brooklyn. I'm right. Yeah. So
I'm in
here
Brooklyn,
I
so I
am.
feel you.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
part of
Here
Brooklyn?
I am. I was born in I was actually born in Canarsie, but
Okay.
which is the L train all the way at the end.
Oh, yeah.
But the or the A train, I think. But I grew up in a place called Seagate at the southern tip of the subway map.
Yep.
I always say it used to be the southern tip was cut off by the map key, where you have so because there's no trains that go there or buses.
Right.
So I grew up in Seagate, Coney Island, and kind of went to school locally until high school, where I went all the way to the other side of Brooklyn in Midwood by Brooklyn College, and then went upstate New York. I was in New York. All my schooling is in New York. Upstate was undergrad. I came back to the city for grad school for the Actor Studio Drama School, and New York through and through until I moved to LA, and I may never move back.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. You're a New Yorker. I feel ya.
Yeah.
Well, okay. So along the lines of like the roles that you've done and everything, what's your favorite? What's your favorite role that you've ever done? Like a play, a musical, TV show, film, anything, if you had to pick one?
I mean, it's tough. It's always the last role you've played.
Right. Oh, yeah. As it should be.
Yeah. And especially because it was such a special experience. And it was like the confluence of all my efforts as an actor, but also my training and my upbringing, and just like, my personality just all filled into this character to a degree where, I've gone to these FYC events because I'm a TV Academy member. And I heard Hannah Waddingham talk about her role on Ted Lasso as just feeling right and feeling like, embarrassingly as an actress, trained actor, actress, that you did not have to do that much to like live in the character. And I was helped by amazing sets and wardrobe and all the wonderful things that, working on the marvelous Mrs. Maisel provides. But yeah,
You're saying your
Alvin.
favorite role is Alvin. Okay.
Is Alvin, but it's a close second just because of, because honestly, I only get to do a certain amount of things as Alvin. It was the writer's room, it was, to chores, and it was like the show. One time we skated on the ice at Rockefeller Center, which I'd never done before as a New Yorker. So that was thrilling. That was our first night shooting.
That's kind of cool.
Wow.
That's amazing.
And
episode too.
yes, all-nighters at Rockefeller Center. And then, so I would have to say a really close second is JT Forbes on Beauty and the Beast, because,
Nice.
almost 70 episodes of a character and an arc and all these different, ups and downs of an actor getting to play, drama, comedy, some action sequences. I got to be like a superhero a little, have a superpower. And I do love Spruce though. The untapped market of Spruce. We were trying to, before web series, we were trying to pitch that as like a spin-off series of Supernatural, which they've tried to do over and over, and they've just missed the ball because all those characters are still alive, whereas most characters in Supernatural have gone by the wayside, have perished, as it were.
I would have watched a Ghostfacers spinoff all day. Like every time it was a Ghostfacers episode, I was super excited. So I'm with you there.
Yeah.
That would have been a
yeah.
All right, let's get into some specific questions. We've got a couple of Instagram questions. Erica, you want to take that first one from Mama Latch 55?
Definitely. So Mama Latch 55 asks, wondering if you ever watch any previous episodes of the show before being cast in the part.
Yes, I watched them all. I was a huge fan of the show, and I feel like that helped me. That definitely helped me, I think, at least get a leg up or an understanding of the pace and the tenor and the tone of the show. When I auditioned for pilots, it's never, you never know. And so you have to take it off the script and your instincts and go with that. And usually when they cast you, you're right. Your instincts are right. Or at least it's in a situation where you could be directed, to a place and you're the character that they want, or the actor, most of the times it's a combination. But with Maisel, like I've watched all the episodes, and here's the weird part is, so season 4 had just premiered or was about to premiere when we auditioned for the show.
Okay.
So I was auditioning late February, early March, and there had been maybe 1 or 2 episodes. So I had seen like 1 or 2 episodes of season 4. So all I had was the information of writer's room, Gordon Ford. And obviously I didn't even know who Gordon Ford was because it wasn't introduced until like episode 2 or 3 or 4, where they're watching, I think the Maisels or the Weissmans are watching Gordon Ford on TV. And then all of a sudden, Sophie Lennon gets on the show, and there's Mike Carr and, the Stage Deli and all this stuff. And so I had to surmise, based on my knowledge of the entire series, what happens. And I know from previous seasons, each season has its own little vignette of like the Catskills, or they're going on tour, or she's, doing, radio ads, and, like she has to make money at the burlesque house because she can't, she's not getting booked anywhere else. So, I basically had to put 2 and 2 and 2 and 3 and, the square root of 5 together and figure out how it's going to work and, read the other breakdowns. Luckily, I had a friend help, the way I found out about it from LA was in New York. They were casting people in New York, and I'm in LA. And so a friend of mine was auditioning, and he asked me to work on the sides with him. And so here I am reading Alvin and the other characters, and he's reading one of the writers.
Oh, that's so
And
funny.
I'm doing the lines. I'm like, this is reminding me of like college when I was doing Neil Simon. It just feels
Right.
like I grew up right by Brighton Beach. I'm like, this character feels like, and the way Amy and Dan write, it feels like that energy, and that the show is very much like that. A lot of the characters, Michael Zegan is like straight out of a Neil Simon show.
Oh, totally.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, like, I don't know
we share that love of Neil Simon, Austin. It was one of the first plays that I ever did was Brighton Beach Memoirs, and I know that was one of the first that you ever did. Yeah,
me too. I did Stan. I was Stan.
Yes.
So when I talk about Neil Simon, it's Brighton Beach Memoirs specifically. But when I grew up, Matthew Broderick was Biloxi Blues. Jason,
right.
who was Brighton Beach Memoirs. There was a movie, but I saw Lost in Yonkers on Broadway. This is something. I feel like other than when I got older and John Patrick Shanley, that kind of writing felt like me speaking, or at least I could speak that language of that playwright. It felt the same way. Whereas like all I had to do is say their words and live in the given circumstances and, go with it. And the jokes were there. I didn't have to like do what you do a lot with, TV and film is you get these, these scripts that are comedies and you're like, all right, I got to make this funny because it's okay. But, and the same thing with Amy and Dan. It's like, you just got to play it. You got to keep on tempo. You got to like, pick up the cues and hit the right balance of like, almost like musicality.
Right.
I said it's like a musical without the, the songs. So,
yes. So you said you were reading with your friend who was auditioning, and then how did you come to audition? Were you just sent the sides like did you just contact your agent and say, hey, this is something I want to try to go out for?
My friend and co-writer, Dave Malbeck, I have to shout him out because without him asking me to help him with the sides, and he knew he had auditioned before, but he also knew that I was a fan of the show. And we, work on auditions together. And so he called me. I was like, you want to jump on a Zoom and I need to work on this. I'm going to tape tomorrow. It's due tomorrow. And I got on, it was like a Wednesday night, and it was due on Thursday. And we went over it. I'm like, oh my God, this is like, can I, do I have your permission to like ask my agents? Because I have to get sides for Alvin. He has sides for another character. They're not the same sides, same scenes, but certain lines are cut out, like certain pages,
So it was Alvin that you read for, just Alvin. It wasn't like Mel or something. And
I chose Alvin. Alvin. Like, and this is like, again, what I was going back to before is like culminating of all these self-tapes I've done over the pandemic, so many close calls, but also like not being in the room and just sending it out there and like feeling like I'm doing good work. And, and in the same way, I, like this might be news, but, I thought I had it. Like, I was like, I got this.
Oh yeah.
And then I got word that they're going a different way. Right. They're going a different way with Alvin. And I was like, and my agents and my manager, and we're like, really? I mean, like, I don't get it. Like, I don't know what the thing was. And I think they may have had someone in mind that ultimately couldn't do it. And then a week or two later, I got a call that there was a live Zoom with Amy and Dan the next day. And they were like, there's 5 scenes for the first audition, 8 scenes for the callback. And I think I got the information or the new sides at like 3 or 4 on a Tuesday. And the live Zoom was at noon or 1 on the next day.
That's how it goes.
So yes, crazy.
But it was meant to be. So, and like you said, when it's meant to be, it doesn't feel like a reach. It doesn't feel like a stretch. It just feels like it was in you, and it was it was your part. It was your role. I love that. That's awesome. Yeah. All right. We got another question from Denise Chamberlain on Facebook. She asks, did you all have fully formed stories for your characters, or did you just like drop into the role and go? Like, how was formulating the backstory among, you and all the other actors in the writer's room?
I credit the chemistry and everyone's, I credit the chemistry that we had in that room. And just from day one, even we did an ice skating rehearsal at Sky Rink in New York.
That's
and
awesome.
It was just like half the people knew each other from before. I worked with Eddie before. Lucas worked with Michael. Josh worked with everyone on Broadway, and knew Jason, Ralph. And it was just like all these things coming together. And then the casting, the casting's ability to kind of see people and know people's work and, kind of create a puzzle that fits together and work together. One of the funny things, the unspoken things that we talked about, because we didn't get last names until the finale episode.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, right.
And so you'll have to ask Lucas Kavner, who's the writer, the actual writer of the group that wrote for a late night talk show. So a lot of questions we had about like what, how it goes, he answered because he had done that before. And
cool.
Michael also is a writer too. So, WGA members, and obviously nothing happens without them. And sorry, that was a beep from my car. It'll shut off in 24 seconds, my car. Just so you know, edit out. So he came up with Lucas came up with all the last names of the characters. And then when we found it out, we're like, oh, I think we like Lucas is better. But yeah, like when I got the thing, because again, I had very, okay. So when I got the, when I got the audition and hadn't seen all of season 4 and didn't know much information, I didn't have the whole script. Yes, I had maybe 20, 25 pages of it. So I could like look at what was crossed out and like other stuff. I got some information and I just knew that he was the head writer of a late night talk show. And it was around, 1960, 1961, because that's where the last season left off. And I knew from that first episode, it picks up right, right after that, like at least of season 4. I didn't know about season 5. So like season 4, she's dropped off at the, like she's, left at the tarmac, and then it picks up right after that. So I looked up anything I could find on like all the people, all the writers of the Sid Caesar show, because I talk about it. My character worked on Sid Caesar. So I know all these people's names. I looked up all those guys. I looked up as much videos because I had seen, tons of Mel Brooks movies. Obviously know who Mel Brooks was. I had watched Carl Reiner on Sid Caesar and know of him from the Dick Van Dyke show and the kind of great clips from that. So I looked up that stuff. I watched the old, Dick Van Dyke because Carl Reiner was the head writer of the Dick Van Dyke show. He actually wrote the pilot that he was in that didn't go, he got replaced as his own as a writer.
Gosh.
He got replaced by Dick Van Dyke.
It's a crazy stories about on that show.
Oh, totally. And I remembered because he had interviews where he talked about actually doing like pretty much every episode for a long time. And they also, the Dick Van Dyke show had a lady writer in it. Also, Sid Caesar had a lady writer in it in 1955 or 56 when that show was going on, mid 50s. So, Midge was not the first of her time, but it was starting to be a thing. And so it was like understanding how a writer's room worked, what was the chemistry between the writers, watching interviews. They had like reunion specials of the Sid Caesar writers that I watched with Mel Tolkien, who was the head writer of the Sid Caesar show. And so between Mel Tolkien and Carl Reiner, I kind of like said somewhere in those, like I'm bald like Carl Reiner and I'm a little chubby like Mel Tolkien. And so between those two, I could, like find a balance of who I am as Alvin, and, a lot of the kind of period work, the period piece, of that time, knowing what the difference between the writer's room I'm familiar with and all my writer friends that are like, sitcoms and dramas, and the way writers' rooms function now. It's a whole different thing for a late night writer's room, and then a whole different thing for a writer's room in the early 60s.
Right. Yeah. And that was something else I was curious about just while we're on the topic. Like, was it super challenging falling into a period piece like in the 60s? What was like the biggest challenge, or was there none? I mean, what was it like to prepare to specifically do a 60s period piece?
Well, I think I've joked about the pandemic because all of a sudden I started doing, every different project was a different decade of the 21st century or the 20th century. So it was like, I think I did a project in 8 different decades. Like, so understanding the difference between like American, how Americans talked, in the 40s versus the 50s versus 60s. I think always for me, like, with dramatic stuff, I have usually a playlist that I play for like, stuff that's not as upbeat and stuff. So I'll listen to certain songs, and, usually I let it kind of shuffle, and I have my own kind of energy. Sorry, there's sirens around, but could you hear that or no?
No, you're good.
No.
Okay, great. So I usually have a playlist for like the more dramatic stuff and like kind of little more method acting type stuff. But I always find it helpful. I did a part on Winning Time on HBO that took place, it's about basketball, the Lakers in the late 1970s and early 80s.
Yeah.
So what I did was I I looked up for 1979, the hits of 1979. And I know some of those songs, but it's like you have to know what the sounds were and what like the energy was of that time. Similar, I did the same thing for 1960, and also with other comedies on, like Car 54, Where Are You? Like, you're talking about a time when the Ed Sullivan Show wasn't even around, yet. So it's like you can't watch Ed Sullivan, you watch Dick Van Dyke. You can watch some stuff of the past, like I Love Lucy and The Honeymooners, and like you have a sense of how comedy was then. And
one of the things that struck me the most when I started to listen to your interviews of just you as Austin is how different you sound from, it's always like I'm an actor myself. I know that like your voice just naturally changes when you get into character. Like everyone is always marveling at Rachel Brosnahan and how she just sounds so different when she's Midge and when she's Rachel, and that was the thing that I was like, oh my God, Austin, he talks like, I never expected you to have the voice that you have naturally, because you really do fall into that, Palladino clip, and you naturally speak at, a slower, more relaxed pace. So
completely. Like I am a sloth. Like, if I had a superpower, it would be faster, like get places on time. So I had to really rev up my engine to be at that level and know that Midge, who talks fast already, is coming into a room where she's overwhelmed. So it's like I knew I had to be responsible for that. And Dan and Amy were very clear with like, they would always like, let's Maisel it up. Like let's faster, louder, funnier.
That's something that we've talked about a ton on the podcast, is just how overwhelming it could be to get those scripts and know the expectations that Dan and Amy have. So can you give us an idea of, how much direction do they give you guys on set? What is it like working with them?
Well, I'll have to say that the writing itself is direction. So when I studied Shakespeare, I had a classics teacher at the Actor Studio Doug Mawston, who was a self-taught Shakespeare scholar. And his whole gimmick was that, and this is true about a lot of scripts, but the best writing will give you clues and direction in the writing, in the words, in the choice of words, in the punctuation. And so, knowing that and kind of approaching modern material with that same like mindset, scripts like Dan and Amy's are Shakespearean in a sense, and you have to like just like commit fully to it. And you can't speed up the pace unless you know the beats and the shifts that happen. So it's like really important to kind of, have those, those beats and those scripts broken down so that when you get to set, half their job is done, or most of their job is done, honestly, because, I'm not going to say, oh, they're better writers than they are directors, but, it's never an equal thing, it's like, I would say they fancy themselves writers first, and then they direct it because, they're the ones that have the vision.
Yeah. It's totally there. It's like you say, everything is baked into the writing. So, and it's so, you have to be so word perfect. And the Palladinos are really like outstanding in that capacity. And actors always talk about how it demanding, but how rewarding it feels to work on a project like that. That's so specific that no one else could possibly touch this, but the people who wrote it,
Yeah. Cause your job is like, like a lot of your job is done for you. Like I was saying, like, when I get scripts and I have to make a joke funny, it's like, why isn't it funny already? Like, like I'm an actor, like I'm not a comedian. Like all I want to do is do the work, like do the lines, commit to the circumstances and to the character, and how the character talks, and the jokes will be there, and the best writing happens like that. And so when we get to situations, where Dan and Amy are on set directing, and they've kind of like, taken off the writer's hat and put on the director's, beret. I've never met anyone more perfectionist than I am, and they are. Right? Like they are perfectionists. And it's not it's not like an established goal. It's like it's something that evolves over the course of shooting it. And I think like when they write it, they have something in mind, and then when everything's shooting and they have an idea of like, we rehearse, we do the lines, we always go through, a lot of times, especially for the bigger shots, that's like, let's say, a 2 to 4 page one shot where that's the only shot that is going to like be that scene, because there's no cutaways. Like it has to be perfect. And there's usually never less than at least 13